Thanks for joining us on the program, and coming under the heels of the recent 2019 Corruption Perception Index released by Transparency International, we shall be looking at tracking corruption in Nigeria on the discussion segment of the program today. Lizzie?
Well, on the media review segment as well, we'll also be taking a look at the index on corruption. Now Nigeria has been rated 146 out of 180. This is quite disturbing for everybody. But the big question is, how do we translate this? How do we sustain information flow? What will be the role of the media?
On Inside today, we shall be looking at corruption across board. Up next on the program is the discussion segment. In tracking corruption in this segment of the program, we shall be basing our discussion on the 2019 Corruption Perception Index released by the Transparency International that says Nigeria slipped down in global rating, scoring 26 out of 100 points, meaning that Nigeria drops in Global Corruption Perception Index, ranked 146th out of 180 countries. Reactions, counter-reactions. Opposition PDP says it has been vindicated. The EFC says Transparency International's basement is baseless and illogical, and there have been a lot of reactions on it. So in also doing this, we shall be looking at corruption, perception or practice, the IT parameters for measuring corruption, big money in politics, lack of internal democracy, and what government is doing, the mileage it has covered within the time under review. My guest on set, I have the Special Assistant to the President on Financial Crimes Compliance and Contracts Implementation, Abiodun Aikomo. Good to have you on the program.
Thank you, Niyi.
Niyi Akinsiju. Niyi Akinsiju is an investment analyst and chairman, Buhari Media Organization. Good to have you on Insight.
My pleasure always. Thanks so much.
Beautiful. In tracking corruption, like I said, what is your perspective regarding what is making the rounds?
The word perspective, here again. You see, perspective is the way a concept or an issue is perceived, is understood. So, first and foremost, I should say that perception is different from reality. Sometimes the press or the journalists, if they decide to paint a person good, whether he is good or not, over time or within a short period of time, everybody begins to see him as a good man. So, Transparency International has released their annual Corruption Perception Index. And I should say, I mean, they've been around for some time, since 1995. So they've succeeded in making corruption, an interesting topic globally. But that is not to say that everything that Transparency International does, especially on these assessments, is infallible or is cast in stone. So an organization has set up criteria to measure corruption in countries of the world, 180 countries of the world, from Nigeria to Canada to the UK to, across the world. And you and I, let's think about it. We have somebody has set up a global criteria, parameters, to measure a concept across the world. How are you likely to get the same results? One of the things I've learned as a student of public policy is that issues of governance is contextual. Governance is purely contextual. So issues of corruption and similar subjects, they are contextual. So when you have an organization that is based somewhere and is looking at the whole world from the same prism and comes out to say, these are my findings, of course, it will be by far different from what the reality on ground is. So I'm saying all these things so we lay a foundation for this discussion. Many people have been talking about it, shouting. It's not like Nigeria has been sentenced to death or condemned. Even in the 2019 results, Canada, which by all standards is not at the same developmental level as Nigeria, dropped points, four points. Nigeria dropped 1. So I'm saying that Nigeria dropped a point in the corruption perception index. Does not mean that the end has come for Nigeria. Does not mean that Nigeria is not doing anything on the subject. Does not mean that it is a death sentence, as it were. So that is to lay the foundation. So corruption perception index, it is the way Transparency International views the occurrence of corruption in Nigeria using its own criteria. And by their own say-so, the index that they have released has inherent validity shortcomings. They have not been totally scientific in their approach. But I would say, as somebody who is involved in the anti-corruption war in Nigeria, it is not lost on us. We know it's a reality that Nigeria is aware of. The president says it all the time. If we do not kill corruption, corruption will kill us. So we are dealing with it. If you see the countries that have been well rated on the index, Singapore, Sweden, New Zealand, these are countries with population less than 10 million. They are hovering, only Sweden has 10 million people. These countries are hovering between 5 million and 5.5 million. So those are the best countries, scoring 78, 77. You know, let's not talk about the developmental level of these countries. These are places where everybody is aware of their rights, where information technology is driving almost every human transaction. You know, all these things make the fight against corruption, as it were, effective. Okay. But you have to look at our context, where we are, the realities that we are dealing with. We have 180, 190 or 200 million people. So mostly uneducated, and the government is trying, laying foundation, building institutional frameworks, amending laws, ensuring that we mainstream anti-corruption into our everyday life. So if an organization somewhere outside Nigeria says, this is the way they see us, as patriotic Nigerians, we should let them know the way we see ourselves and what we are doing. So it is not a result that Nigerians, if they are patriotic, should be excited about and be using to taunt people in government as if they are doing nothing. Okay. That is not the case.
Okay, let me hold it there for now. Niyi, given the scenario you have painted, as much as I will not want to go there, the tantrums are just playing out. And some persons who are saying, yes, from the angle he talked about patriotism, some are not seeing it from that perspective at all. And they are looking at it from the fact that it is true. It is not true. It is true. And some persons are saying, IT parameters for measuring corruption. Would you say there were no scientific, or they were scientific about it?
I think the first thing to establish is that most often we brush aside patriotism and nationalism when issues like this come up, and we try to, as much as possible, advance the sentimental, emotional aspect of this in the context of politics. You know, if you see most people that are throwing tantrums and of course celebrating these figures, this rating, as it were, are likely to be on the other side of the ruling party, and for them it's a justification. You know, well, I think it's patently wrong, because if we're talking about issues like this, it should be about it talks to our national pride and our national standing, especially amongst the international community. And of course, some of us would also want to contest the basis for this rating. For me personally, and the organization that I represent, I believe strongly that this is not appropriate. The rating is not appropriate. It is not a capture of the reality of the Nigerian situation, And of course, the process of arriving at this rating is also debatable, to the extent that you can say that it cannot be generalized. And the basis of rating, the processing of rating, is to be able to generalize, But in this matter, it cannot be generalized. Our reality is that we have issues, challenges with corruption. That's our reality. Our reality is also speak to the fact that we have accepted as a corporate sovereign, that corruption is a major headache, both to our growth, to our development, etc., etc. Our reality is the fact that we are engaging corruption, at least at the federal level. And it is not just by campaign, it's not just by advocacy. We have seen that it has gone beyond advocacy to engagement. We can start talking about results, either in terms of policy deployment, like the TSA, which the TI representative in Nigeria specifically referenced, and other forms of engagement, either at the level of conviction, either at the level of investigation, the quantum of recoveries, all these things talk to activities. Now that dovetails into the basis of perception, which is the core indices, the core indices, as it were, that TI is measuring. The representative of TI, Transparency International in Nigeria, is the Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, CISLAC. That's the direct representative of TI in Nigeria. And in announcing this, they addressed a press conference. I have a copy of the press statement here. The first two paragraphs of that statement talks to the fact that what they are talking about is perception but not reality. The author and the person that addressed that conference said that clearly, that it is perception and not reality. And they went on to say that the results, the rating that they are talking about, was the collation of the opinion of some people. Collation of opinions of some people. Now, the question you want to ask is, who are these people? What sorts of opinion have they advanced? As far as I'm concerned, it could be opinions generated from statements issued by PDP, could be opinions generated by statements issued by former President Obasanjo, who incidentally is a member of the board of TI. Could be an opinion generated by Dr. Mrs. Ezekwesili, who also incidentally is a member of the board of TI, and some other civil organization that had issued one statement or the other, at the point in time. So what we are saying essentially is the opinion of these people, as rightfully as it may be, do not also represent the general opinion of the Nigerian mass, which is the important thing. If you are talking about perception, it's supposed to be the perception of the Nigerian people, So for you to aggregate, you must also follow a process, that is scientific, that will establish the credibility of the outcome. So for me, there are more questions, than answers in this matter. And I think principally, I cannot take it to heart, neither can I also approve it, because it lacks that scientific approach, as it were.
Okay. Now, Niyi, Abiodun, you talked about that it has inherent validity shortcomings. You mentioned that before now. You are the SCTD President of Financial Crimes Compliance and Contracts Implementation. Using your office and basing what has been made public, what do you make of it?
Well, from what I know
Yeah.
and what we are doing.
Because if you listen to the other side, the arguments are just there, strong, witty.
No,
So-
you confront me with the arguments, then I will meet you.
Using your office.
But using my office,
Yes.
in the last term, I was essay to the president on financial crimes. In this second term, something has been added to it: compliance and contracts implementation. You see, the Federal Ministry of Justice, under the leadership of Attorney General Malami, has designed a national anti-corruption strategy framework, which the Executive Council has passed. And it is resting on 5 pillars: prevention, campaign for ethical reorientation, enforcement of sanctions, recovery. You know, when you have endemic corruption, just like Mr. Niyi said, it is a reality that we know. We are not shying away from it. We are confronting it headlong. We are tackling it. The government is not in denial. We all know. Nobody needs to remind us. So we are facing it. When you have endemic corruption, corruption is the rule rather than exception. We have been with corruption for a long time. It has become a way of life. So when you want to tackle it, you need to take some foundational measures. You need to take some steps. It's not that you just, if the foundation be bad, what can you do? You don't just start laying blocks. You need to do foundation. If you are going to erect the building where in a waterlogged area, perhaps maybe you need to pile or do raft foundation. But in this case, we are doing piling. There are so many things that an average person on the road may not know. If we are developing institutional capacity in the fight against corruption by putting things in place, training people, acquiring technology, which over time will be deployed. You know, people on the street may not know this, but it doesn't mean that work is not ongoing. So based on what I know in terms of capacity building, reform of laws, and, you know, a lot of institutional reforms, we are doing a lot of work. On contract implementation, we just woke up one day and realized that the whole nation is in trouble because of a contract that was entered into some years ago. Judgments given against Nigeria to the tune of several billions of dollars. If the money had been paid, you and I would not be sitting here. So, because of that, a lot of things had been put in place. The Attorney General wrote letters to all agencies of the federal government so that they can tell us all such potential liabilities that they may be having in their agencies. So we set up a unit that is currently reviewing all our risk and vulnerabilities so that we can find a way to deal with it. This is not what you read in the papers. Do you know how many contracts there are in the Ministry of Petroleum alone that has the potential of putting Nigeria in trouble? And all these things are not done single-handedly by Nigerians. Look at the P&ID case. People are being convicted, people are being tried in Nigeria now, foreigners. So, with the collaboration of a few Nigerians. So I'm saying all these things so everybody can know that when you talk about perception, so you want to find out about corruption in Nigeria, then you are speaking to somebody at a car park, at a motor park, who is just traveling. And he says, what is the government doing about corruption? He says, we cannot see anything they are doing. Whereas, they, like I said, the analogy I used, they are busy piling because they want to erect a standard structure on a waterlogged area. So, in essence, what the government is doing, especially in line with the National Anti-Corruption Strategy framework, is we are at the current stage of strengthening institutions, building capacities. You know, it's in different stages. All the things going on about anti-corruption in Nigeria is at the federal level. You can imagine if we have a federal system of government where the coordinate units, where the other units are coordinated and independent. Imagine if, as we have UFCC, ICPC at the national level, There are similar organizations across the 36 states, and they are moving at the same pace. It won't be the same thing. So the government, the federal government, is doing a lot. Mr. Niyi has spoken about some of the steps that the government has taken. The TSA, which has been seriously enforced. You know, people hitherto were keeping monies in accounts all over the place. It was impossible to have a view of what was going on. Now the president has said, put everything in one basket. So let's see how it is being managed. If you know what TSA alone has done in the fight against corruption, you know it is humongous. The BVN policy, some people may argue that it's not new to this government. I mean, it wasn't an idea of this government. But this government has shown capacity and commitment and fidelity to enforcing it more than you can imagine. Now, it is difficult to have fictitious accounts to run a anti-corruption corruption scheme anywhere. So the government is doing a lot of work. We all need to see it. We all need to be part of it. We all need to make sure it works.
Okay. So, as it is now, we have talked about from the perspective of being patriotic, from the perspective look at it from the lens of Nigeria and the lens of Nigerians. So why play politics with it?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but of course, you know, it's Nigeria. Our politics is still evolving, and I keep discounting, you know, the facts of the kind of emotions, you know, that we attach to our political outlook, because we are still in evolution. And as I always say, our politics is about acquisition, and where you are not properly positioned, you are praying that the person that had replaced you, you know, should fumble, let me use that word, or die, you know, so that you can come and replace that person and also continue, you know, with what you desire in office. I can say that for most politicians, the urge, desire for political pursuits is not about service. And that is why over time, either during the military era or in civilian era, we had always had to contend with huge cases of corruption. And as the essay said, it's the norm. You know, it has become a culture to the extent that we need now to also start prodding the individual hearts, the individual Nigerian hearts. So we also have a tendency for buck person, and we need to tell ourselves the truth. Either at what level, at the level of the public service, at the level of civil society and all that. Are we actually properly conducting and comporting ourselves away from corrupt acts and activities as individuals? You know, because it is the aggregation of individuals that also reflects our national outlook. And we should not, for God's sake, you know, try to cite that out. The fact is that the Nigerian individual should ask him or herself that in this situation or in this position, what would you desire? What would you do? And that is what I'm talking about, people thinking of politics at all times. At our level, at my level, and I call myself a noisemaker. Yes, I have a passion to defend this government. And I can tell you, by showing today on this program, I will receive not less than 10 telephone calls reminding me of someone asking for a job somewhere, or someone asking for a contract somewhere, or someone asking for something somewhere, to use my perceived influence to corner state resources for this individual. And of course, if I fall into that, if I have that kind of influence and I fall into that and I do it, I will be acting corruptly. And those who requested for it would also be beneficiaries, they will also be benefiting from corrupt activities. So we need that orientation. We need to start also pruning, you know, and reorientating ourselves as individuals. But going beyond that is the fact that government will put institutions, and I can see those obvious institutions in place. I'd always categorize corruption into two: grand corruption and, of course, petty corruption, process corruption. Before 2015, we had huge issues with grand corruption. We used to know petty corruption. That's what we meet. I mean, process corruption. Those are the corrupt scenarios that we get to see on the street, with policemen collecting something, with nurses. If you go to the general hospital, you need to tip a nurse to treat you. You need to tip the pharmacist to give you drugs or something. These are process corruption. You are confronted with it everywhere, which is wrong. In fact, there was a conference or a seminar on this kind of process corruption, and they valued it at 611 billion naira. When that, I think, is what a UNDP conference. That's the value of process corruption in Nigeria. But I say, have you forgotten the value of grand corruption? Between 2005 or thereabout and 2015, 10 years, the sum of $150 billion was said to have been taken out of this country. That is the sum taken out of the country. Not this, that is minus, discount the sum that was retained in this country. You can only imagine what it will be. And of course, those are the products, of someone using his or her office to corner state resources, either through contracts, or either just driving to CBN, using the power of the president at the point in time to collect, open the vault and collect without any form of process. Either in terms of procurement, either in terms of whatever process we are talking about. And these are instances we have seen instances of this in our history. Now, these are the things you cannot possibly see at this time. One, because there is also an increased consciousness by Nigerians, especially as enabled by the social media. The government, the Buhari government, when it was coming in, it came in on a platform of huge morality. So because of that, there is an increased standard, a huge standard, and of course public perception of what and how a government or individuals in that government should comport themselves. So Nigerians are now using that standard to measure activities within the government, So that is also a huge difference, as it were.
Now, could it be that, like you said, that maybe they just tied the assessment within a few individuals who have voiced out sometime in the life of this administration? Could it also be that maybe they just went to some states, because we are talking about the fact that anti-corruption has taken firm, witty roots at the center, but the states appear not to follow suit in that speed as much as the fact that we talk about it. Could it be that they just ended up and came up with a report?
Mr. Niyi specifically referred to CISLAC's press statement, which he has, I believe he will read it out at some point. Yes. When you have 180, 190 million people, and there is a subject that cuts across everywhere, it affects everybody, and you have only taken the views of institutional lenders who are not even in Nigeria, who may not appreciate the realities on ground, to form the basis of your perception. It is, to my knowledge of research studies, will make it suffer validity challenges. The people that you have spoken to, how do they represent the population of Nigeria? What is their realities? What is their opinion? What do they think about corruption? What do they know about corruption fight that is going on in Nigeria? Isaac Newton says everybody is a genius. But when you measure or assess a fish by its ability to climb trees, you get a very poor result. And conversely, if you measure, so everything is contextual. So by their say-so, they have admitted that they have not adopted purely scientific procedures. The process may not have been properly triangulated. They have only relied on the opinions of some people. Who are these people? How many are they? Are they biased? Are they speaking? There are so many challenges. Even the definition of corruption that Transparency International adopts has been subject of criticism from many quarters. And like I said, when you set up a global parameter to assess all the countries of the world, notwithstanding the realities that are varied, of course, the result cannot represent the reality.
Okay.
That is what we are saying.
But we still have pockets of visible cases here and there, isolated cases here and there. And if, for instance, Nigeria is placed where it is, and like you said, Canada even dropped by 4 points? Is it 4 points or 2 points?
4 points.
4 points, fine. And is there really anything we can do as a people to build our culture so that that culture we already have, myself, Nigerians are corrupt? We could depart from it, and maybe subsequent ratings we will not be seen from that perspective. I feel that maybe this whole thing, they didn't just look at what government is doing alone. They looked at the attitude of the people. Because like he said, using his office as a yardstick, a lot has been done to see how Nigeria
is ongoing.
Ongoing, beautiful.
Beautiful.
So, as a people, could our culture, our lifestyle, or the way of life be looked into?
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Niyi. Even from the Transparency International's results, they said election activities has a lot of bearing on these
big money
reports.
Politics. We'll get to that.
Now, 2019 was an election year. How many political parties do we have in Nigeria? Is it only the government in power that spent money for purpose of argument? So when people want to over-politicize issues, it was election time, you were spending money as if money was going out of circulation, as if money was anything, the most important thing in election. You and I know the EFCC is currently prosecuting persons for election malpractices in terms of financial recklessness. People are found with dollars, moving monies up and down. They are being prosecuted now, by the same government. INEC officials have been convicted because of their criminal conduct during the elections. And somebody somewhere says the government is not doing anything, our electoral process is useless, and you think we will accept that. When in reality, as everybody knows, the government is not folding its arms, is responding appropriately, at least based on what we can see. Okay. So we cannot substantiate that.
For what I asked him.
Before that, let me also, of course, enhance that position the SC had taken with this statement. This is a statement read on that, and I'm not taking Sislak on. We're just trying to put things in context, and of course to get it done better. This is the third paragraph of this statement. The CPI aggregates data from a number of different sources that provide perception by business community and country experts of the level of corruption in the public sector. That's the basis of collation. That's the basis of collation. So what that tells you is that this is just a collection of opinion of targeted people, and anybody who studies any basic social science discipline will tell you that this could not represent, the perception, as it were. Because you can measure some perception. You can measure perception and measure reality, Perception is opinion. It's always opinion. So you do a survey. You do your representative population and all that. So of course, it is when you get this result that you can now effectively generalize and say that this is actually the perception of, this represents the perception of the 200 million people in this country. It's supposed to be the perception of Nigerians, not people outside Nigeria in the first instance. Now, going forward, about the Nigerian context itself, I've said it. We have issues with corruption. And it just didn't happen. It evolved over the years. In 1965, and I am sorry to refer to this, the basis of that military putsch was 10%. Then we moved from that 10%, to 100%. And then from that 100% to no percent at all. Where people take, the allegation at that time was that, okay, you take a government contract, you give 10%. That was the allegation. It got to a stage, public sector players would take that business by themselves, bid for it by themselves, collect the money and pocket it. And nobody does anything about it. And then, of course, the whole thing percolated down to the grassroots. And everybody saw public appointments as basis, for self-enrichment. And that's what it's all about, and it's annoying. Of course, we need to start telling ourselves that we are all losers in this enterprise, as it were. We cannot go on like this.
It's not a political party thing.
It is not about political party. No, that's the truth. We cannot go on like this. We know it's a problem. It's a challenge. But why we supported President Buhari was that he stood on a higher moral ground. And since he had come into office, there have been clear engagement with corrupt acts and activities, which makes a difference compared to where we were coming from. I've followed up, on the pedigree of a certain government, where the head of that government intervened on a matter that's just about 10 million that was being investigated by the EFCC. When a head of government does that, you know what it implies. But you don't have, in the case of the current president, we have a former, or rather, even a deputy chief whip of the Senate, who was former governor, of a state, two-term governor, who belongs in the ruling party, as it were, and was very, very close, and even though let's even use was, he is very, very close to the president, but he was still sent to prison for 7 years, while you have our president still seated. That's the kind of engagement we are looking at, where you have neutrality. The three governors that are in prison as at this time were members of the APC, the ruling party. So when you look at all this scenario, you see engagement, and that's the kind of engagement we are talking about. And we are now also saying that Nigerians should start also looking up at the standard, being led by the president, as it were. We should also start realizing the fact that we are all losers in this enterprise if we continue this way, because we must all bring neutrality, to grow our commonwealth as Nigerians.
Okay, conclude.
Well, in conclusion, like I've always admonished, Nigerians should learn patriotism. I think that's my own conclusion. It is lack of patriotism that has taken us to where we are. If people are patriotic, one man would not steal monies belonging to the whole community. And it has been re-echoed several times. The fight against corruption is an existential battle for us. It is either we destroy corruption or we fold our arms for it to ultimately destroy us. But may that day never come. That is why everybody, it's a battle that everybody must join. Nigeria will survive all of us, no matter how long we stay.
Okay.
So we should join this campaign for ethical reorientation. Let us destroy this ecosystem of corruption that we have created, so that good governance can be enjoyed by all.
Thank you, gentlemen. It was nice chatting with you on this, and we hope that our perspective too will further permeate the society and let people know the other side of the story. Niyi Akinsiju, thanks for being on the program.
A pleasure.
And Abiodun Aikomo.
Aikomo.
Does that have you on the program?
Yes, thank you so much.
Up next on Inside is the media review segment. Stay with us.
Thanks for joining us on the media review segment of the program. The latest index on corruption by Transparency International is generating concern. Why is this so? Nigeria has been rated 146 out of 180. What does this portend for us as a nation? My guest, who is a media mogul, Mr. Maxwell Isegbe, lecturer, International Institute of Journalism, Abuja, will provide answers. It's nice to have you in our studio.
Thank you for inviting me to your studio.
All right. Now, what exactly does this mean to you, this figure, this rating?
Yeah, thank you very much. First and foremost, let me commend you for you people are doing a wonderful job in it here. I remember some years back when I was here, but thank God, God will continue to give you the grace and the enablement to continue where we have left. Now, coming back to your question, let's look at the core value of the media itself. To entertain, to inform, and to educate. That's right. But you find it hard to believe now. The major thing, the medias are not actually going down what they are supposed to do. To entertain, inform, and to educate. Now, the media have to really go in depth, looking into transparency, looking into accountability of the urban areas, which they are doing. But when you look at the other way around, in the rural areas, this thing is conspicuously absent. If, for instance, I'm in the urban area, I will find it difficult to know what is happening. This is because the media are not focusing attention, and we expect them to do in depth. Moreover, they are talking about entertainment, which I think is also important, but then the one you talk about is more important. We are talking about people are not actually looking in depth to find out what is happening in the cities. In the rural areas, nothing is happening. So how do you know, how do you inform people? How do you educate people? How do you entertain people, those in the rural areas? These are some of the things we are talking about. And this is where I also think that journalists themselves should be more educated, should be more trained, and should be more trained to be able to inform the people who are in the social milieu.
Okay, now that brings me to the big question.
Yes.
How do we sustain information flow, the media?
Except they go down in depth, the information will be scarce. Sheikh Ahmed once said, he said, free flow, balanced, equitable distribution across the international media, which means across the international borders, which means information should not be hidden. Anywhere you go, information should be free to flow. That is why the journalists are there, except many of them are scared. Otherwise, if they are not scared, why should information be scared? For me and you to acquire, to consume.
That means it's been hoarded.
It's been hoarded along the line, and it should not be so. That is why you are there to do your job. That is why the beat is there for you to do. If you are in the sports beat, you are supposed to go in depth. If you are in the judiciary, you are supposed to go in depth. If you are in the villa, you are supposed to go in there and tell us what is happening at the villa. Not necessarily when the president is there. It should not be so. You should go in depth. But we find it now that people are more interested in the entertainment and all these things, which are of no value to the people in the grassroots.
Sensationalization.
Yes. And I think I would urge my colleagues in the media there to do more. To do more. Although the journalism itself is a noble profession. Let's be honest to ourselves. But then, doing the job is hard enough. And that is why, if you are not ready to do the job, you throw into the tower. And that is the truth. Do more investigative. Even the president said it when he came in. He said we should do the second copy. He said journalists should do more investigative report rather than just straightforward report.
Do people in the rural areas understand what this means?
Even
Nigeria is 146. Do they
Yes.
understand? So
But
are there methods the media would apply to help Nigerians understand what this means for us as
we come back to this,
a
what
nation?
we were asking the other time, that they need to be informed. The Somali journalists, they are critical.
Okay.
And that is why most of them are being killed most of the time. You are aware. But then the opportunities are not there for them to do what they call investigative report. You remember some years back when 15 of them were killed on the line
Yes.
because the authorities in Somalia were saying that they are the one reporting the society, the reporting within their own district. They are the one reporting their own home to outside world. The opportunities are not there, but we have the opportunity there to report and tell members of the public what is on the ground for us. But people are not doing it, probably because they believe that they are ill-equipped, which I think is no answer. They are free to report what they like. Nobody is holding them, except that they believe that to go in depth is difficult for them. That is why you are being trained. That is why you've decided to take journalism as a profession. You need to go in depth and tell us what is happening. If I'm an investigative reporter, I don't mind. I don't want to go in depth. But then the facilities must be available for me to use and get my information right.
Okay, now, Denmark and New Zealand were found to be the least corrupt countries in the world.
Denmark. Yes.
And New Zealand. Would you say their media did so well to ensure that the people held their governments accountable? People asked questions.
Informations,
they had information
yes,
at the tip of their
informations are their
fingers.
Yes, they have the access to go in depth and tell members of their own vicinity what is available.
Okay.
The facilities are there. They can go in depth and depth. But then, the journalists themselves, they are scarce there. So many people are being killed along the line during the course of their job. But then, I also think we should, given the opportunity here, we should not be afraid. We should not be scared. Nobody is holding you not to report anything. But you have chosen journalism as a profession. You should go in depth and tell everyone what is on the tip. I've heard people often saying that it's not what you see that you report. Report what you see, and people will love you. That is why you've chosen the profession. You should go in depth. Tell us what is on the ground. And that is what you are there for.
Okay.
And you'll be brave if you're able to report exclusively
what you saw,
what you have
and what
seen.
you met.
Exactly. That is the truth.
Okay. Now, the index actually focused on politics and money. What's the correlation?
It's a lot.
Okay.
Because people, journalism, some people will say, go in depth and get what you want. But don't also forget that in this country, the job is not there. The problem is that most media houses, they are out of the market. And most times, some people will die, some media houses will come up and whatever. But along the line, if you see a politician decide to come and slap you with about 500,000 naira, there's nothing you cannot do. God forbid, there's nothing you cannot do. But then we are saying politics and money, it has no correlation, but it works hand in hand most times. And even outside this country, it works. Because many people believe that without politics, money will not come. And money should be able to guide them. Because people will tell you that, why am I having families? Why am I having this? I need to do my job to be able to get money to what I need.
Okay, so does that mean for Nigeria to leave this particular number, this spot on the index, journalists must engage in investigative reporting?
They must have to.
Okay.
I remember the former Minister for Information during Babangida's regime once said that if you want to choose journalism as a profession, don't say because you want to come and make money. Look for another profession. But if you want to go in depth and do what you are supposed to do. Then follow the code of conduct laid down by the Nigerian Union of Journalists. That is just the truth.
All right, Mr. Maxwell Isegbe, thank you so much for your time. Thank you very much for coming to our studio.
God bless you for inviting me for your studio.
Thank you so much. And that's it on the Media Review segment this week.
Well, it's time to go, Lizzie.
Well, I have a question.
Okay.
I understand that Denmark and New Zealand were found to be the least corrupt countries. How true is that?
Well, it is like the guest have said, it's based on the angle they saw it from, whatever parameters they used.
Okay.
They have said it here that we should always look at things not as a Nigeria, but Nigeria.
Of course.
Not from a political perspective or your ethnic background, but given what has taken place, what should we do as a people to develop our culture towards the fact that if people don't see us in a generic perspective as corrupt, we will not be where we are. So basically, patriotism and seeing everything as Nigerians, basically.
Well, of course, don't forget corruption. Fighting corruption begins with you. So it's everybody's business.
And mind you, the campaign on change begins with you, begins with me, is still on. That's it on the program today. We believe we had it insightful. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.